Thank you for joining me for the sixth session in the Systematic Review Seminar Series. My name is Tom Harrod, and I'm the Associate Director for Reference, Instruction, and Access at the Himmelfarb Health Sciences Library at the George Washington University. The topic of this session will be screening articles, and here we can see what we've covered in the prior sessions in the series, as well as the topics which will be covered in the subsequent sessions. In prior sessions, we've gotten up to the point of running our searches and identifying relevant articles and other resources. And now we're going to start to discuss how to winnow those down. During this session, we'll discuss the two stages of screening: title abstract screening and full text review. After that, we'll talk about several important considerations, including the necessity of having multiple reviewers at this step, as well as some considerations for developing the inclusion-exclusion criteria, which will drive the screening process. In one of the prior sessions, I talked about the idea of precision versus recall. That is, when using article databases, or any other similar resource, when you create a search strategy, there are two opposing qualities of the search: precision and recall. A search with high precision will return only articles that are on the desired topic. That is, for a search that returns 20 articles, if it has 100% precision, then all 20 of the articles will cover the desired topic. As opposed to recall, which means returning all relevant articles. That is, a search that has 100% recall will bring up every single relevant article on a topic. But when one of those goes up, the other necessarily goes down. A high recall search will be imprecise, and a very precise search will have low recall. Systematic reviews err on the side of recall. That is, to make sure that no pertinent evidence is missed, and so they will be very imprecise, meaning that a lot of articles will need to be screened out. And that happens in two phases: title abstract screening and full text review. During the title abstract screening, reviewers read the titles and abstracts of articles to determine whether the article should be kept. At this stage, in Covidence, reviewers can vote yes, no, or maybe. The maybe option exists as it may not be possible to tell from just the title and abstract whether an article belongs. In Covidence, one that receives a maybe vote will be treated the same as one that receives a yes vote, and it will be moved on to the next phase in the process. Articles that receive a no vote in Covidence will be moved to an irrelevant article folder. The next phase in screening is the full text review. During this phase, all of those articles that receive the requisite number of yes or maybe votes during the title abstract screening phases will be reconsidered. However, this time, reviewers will need to review the entire article and decide whether to include or exclude the article. At this stage, the maybe button is no longer present, as one should be able to accurately determine whether an article belongs if they've read it in its entirety. Here we can see a Prisma flowchart. This is a common element in most published systematic reviews, and so if you've ever read a systematic review, you've undoubtedly seen one of these before. The purpose of the Prisma flowchart is to track what happened to all of the articles that were identified during the literature searches. At the top, you will see the total number of records retrieved. In this example, it is 1,143. Next, you will see that after deduplication of the records, that number drops to 525. Finally, after both screening steps have been performed, the authors were left with only 16 articles for analysis. This is a good example of what I mentioned earlier. Systematic review searches exhibit high recall but very low precision. In fact, many systematic reviews have an even lower rate of articles getting through all of the stages. Oftentimes, far fewer than 1% of the articles initially found in the search will make it all the way to the end. As mentioned in a prior video, systematic reviews must be performed by a team and not just an individual. The screening stages are one of the critical steps that require multiple votes. The reason is that two or more independent voters will help to minimize the possibility of bias that might creep in if the choices are only being made by a single person. During the screening stages, if the voters disagree and there's a split decision, the team will need to have a process in place to break the tie. Either a third person looks at the article, or else the two voters who disagree will need to sit down and talk it through to decide who is right. Such a process helps ensure a robust and fair process in which all records get proper consideration. An important aspect of having multiple voters at the two screening phases is the need for proper training. That means taking steps before the screening process begins in earnest to ensure that all of the reviewers are on the same page. This can be accomplished by taking a subset of the articles as a test run, having all reviewers cast a vote, and then sitting down to talk through any disagreements that arise to make sure there's a shared understanding of what people should be looking for. Taking the time to do this step can save a lot of time down the road, as it will help minimize disagreements when screening begins on the entire body of articles. It is highly recommended that this extra step be taken. In all of the preceding discussions, one topic that has not been covered is how the voting is done. That is, what rules the reviewers should apply in order to decide whether to include or exclude a record. These rules are called the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and all screening decisions should be made in accordance with these criteria and not based on a reviewer's gut feeling or intuition. Again, having a solid set of inclusion-exclusion criteria that are shared in the resulting manuscript minimizes the possibility of bias and adds to the transparency of the project. Developing these criteria is very often a nonlinear process, and the rules will likely undergo multiple iterations as reviewers apply them and discover that something is lacking or that something is ill-defined, requiring a reappraisal and revision of the criteria. Very often, these rules speak to the PICO or PIO elements of the question. That is, specifically defining the population, intervention or exposure, and the outcomes of interest to make sure that the reviewers end up with a homogeneous set of articles at the end that can be directly compared. For instance, if one were testing an intervention to assist individuals with diabetes, it would be important to define what they mean by diabetes, type 1, type 2, gestational, or all of the above. It would also be important to specify desired outcomes. That is, how will success of the intervention be measured? Lower hemoglobin A1C levels, lower blood glucose, decreased hospital stays, fewer complications, patient satisfaction, etc. Other inclusion-exclusion criteria to be considered may be the language of the article, the publication type, or other characteristics of the publication. This all brings up an important issue. Does the development of the inclusion-exclusion criteria have to be done a priori, that is, prior to the voting, or can it be done post hoc, i.e., after the voting has begun? As described previously, there are almost certainly going to be post hoc alterations to the criteria, as it's impossible to know with 100% accuracy what your inclusion-exclusion criteria need to be, as there may be aspects of the articles that you did not anticipate. You don't know what you don't know. This uncertainty will require that the development of the rules be in an iterative process. Develop the criteria, apply it to a subset of articles, make adjustments, apply it to a subset of articles, and repeat until the rules are complete. Then go back and apply them to all of the articles. That is, applying the final criteria to the articles that you use to help you refine the criteria. As a reminder, it's crucial to take time to train your reviewers so there's a shared understanding of the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and document everything. I also want to point out that in Covidence, your inclusion-exclusion criteria can be entered on a form that can be reached by going to Settings and then Eligibility Criteria. After doing this, you can have Covidence display your rules at the top of the screen while you are doing the title abstract and full text screening, to help keep those rules fresh in your mind as you go through the articles. In conclusion, we discussed how the large number of articles from the initial searches are winnowed down in a two-step process: title abstract screening and full text review. Furthermore, we looked at how the decisions need to be made by a well-defined set of inclusion-exclusion criteria that all reviewers understand and apply consistently. Thank you, and here is my email address, tph@gwu.edu. Students and faculty at the George Washington University should feel free to contact me for assistance. Our next session will cover data extraction.